And welcome to the February 28th, 2022 City of Tualatin work session. Our first item on the agenda tonight is our illustrious former staffer, Garrett, will present ODOT's I-205 tolling project update. Welcome, Garrett.
Welcome all. And there, I had some little ODOT intro music that we play for now, so just give me 1 second.
So the Death Star music?
Okay, thank you.
I knew it.
That's right there. A little for the mayor. Members of council, Mayor, thanks for being here. For those of you who didn't know, in 2018, I was looking for income and healthcare as we moved across the country with our kiddo to be, and landed wonderfully here in the city of Tualatin for that for our first couple of years. So thanks for having us here tonight. I'm joined by the wonderful Heather Wills and Chris Wellander, who you'll hear from in a second to walk through some of the update. And we are going to talk a little bit, we'll kind of talk high level, but then dive into the details. I've been going through the resolution you all passed on some of the key questions and points you wanted covered. So we'll walk through kind of each one of those and where we think those are being incorporated or can be addressed in the project. So thank you. And do you mind, do we screen share, or do you us bring up us? Okay. Oh, and MJ's here as well. Thank you, MJ. Actually,
I think this is the wrong presentation, MJ.
Yep. And I've got it here if need be, MJ.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. Okay. So, can people see it now? Okay. All right. So this is the I-205 toll project update to the Tualatin City Council. We're going to start with a short, just kind of 2-minute overview video. I think this does an excellent job of just kind of explaining generally how the tolling system will work and the questions we're working on to solve. Oh, so no, I didn't want to do that.
To improve traffic, the Oregon Department of Transportation is studying proposals for a variable rate toll, also called congestion pricing, on I-5 and I-205 in the Portland region. We have heard questions about what this means for I-205 and local roads. Analysis shows that tolling and investing in I-205 will significantly
Yep.
Tolling and investing in I-205 will significantly reduce congestion and improve reliability on I-205. Many drivers will see the tolled interstate provides a more reliable trip with reduced travel times and will choose to pay for that predictability. Less congestion can mean fewer hours spent on interstate travel, fewer emissions, and progress in meeting climate goals. With a toll, some drivers will choose to adjust their trip. For example, if you know the interstate will be backed up at 5 p.m., you may decide to delay your trip, change where you are going, take transit, or not make the trip at all. Avoiding rush hour travel improves the flow of traffic for people staying on the interstate. A variable rate toll prompts people to consider their best option. Some people are worried traffic will get worse on the side streets if drivers are looking to avoid a toll. We call this rerouting, which is a type of diversion. We already see this today as drivers are rerouting off the interstates to avoid congestion. If we do nothing, community impacts will continue to grow. The toll program wants to avoid causing neighborhood impacts. We're using computer models to predict what happens to traffic based on past observations, driver preferences, local roadway designs, development patterns, and time of day. At areas where drivers are predicted to use local roads and delay traffic enough to fail local standards of traffic flow, we will figure out how to fix the issue. For example, We could build a new turn lane, or change the timing of a traffic signal, or add bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We want to make sure you have the information about the tolling proposals under consideration. Please visit OregonTolling.org for the most up-to-date information.
Excellent. So, in our next slide, I'm now going to turn it over to Heather to walk through just kind of where tolling sits within the larger work and the strategy that ODOT's working on. Heather?
Thanks, Garrett. So this is their mobility strategy map. And the I-205 toll project is a project that is part of this overall strategy. Essentially, anytime you're trying to travel somewhere, whether you're going to work, or you're taking your kids to school, you want a reliable trip. And it doesn't work to just piecemeal and do one project at a time. So this is the strategy that ODOT's developed, and it includes tolling to fund projects, as well as tolling to relieve congestion. Garrett and Chris will get into more details about this.
Definitely. And just say one more thing as we move on. I know like the future, this doesn't include all of the projects that ODOT's working on. I know the work on 99W and the planning for the future of that and those needs is something that ODOT had been working on previously with you all, and is something we'll look at studying when we get to that larger regional mobility pricing project. Sorry, Heather, just wanted to jump.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Yep.
So this is the high level schedule. You've got the I-205 toll project, and what we're doing right now is the environmental review. And we intend to conclude the environmental review process at the end of this year, but the earliest that tolling could begin is 2024. The regional mobility pricing project is also happening right now. The I-205 toll project is really the first part of the overall regional mobility pricing project that will occur. All along the process, we are doing equity as well as a ton of public input from lots of different ways. Next slide, please. So we get this question a lot. Why is the 205 tolling starting before the regional congestion pricing? The first reason is that I-205 will serve really as the proof of concept. It's really the first part of that regional system, and tolling is needed to complete the I-205 improvements project. That first phase, I think bids are being collected tomorrow, and the first phase is $375 million. And if we delay the improvements, if we delay tolling, then the improvements will cost a lot more per year, $24 million more per year. Next slide, please. Oh, and now I hand it over to Chris.
Yeah, excellent. And just going real quick before Chris jumps off. So in that schedule Heather was showing, there was a yellow circle for the I-205 toll project. And what Chris is going to talk about is where we're working towards on that yellow circle, which is a real key. It's called the draft environmental assessment, which we're planning for around June this year. So sorry, Chris, I just wanted to do a little table setting and let you jump in on some of the details on kind of where we're at in working towards there.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's perfect. And yeah, we are working on the draft environmental assessment, which we'll have out in June of this year. So we're getting close. And I'll just talk about some of the things we're seeing so far and maybe set the stage for it. Yeah, go ahead. Next slide. It's good. So this is a map of the project area. Those sideways pink H's are where the toll gantries are proposed at this point. One just on the west or south side of the Abernathy Bridge, and then the other close to the Tualatin River bridges. And then the yellow is kind of the project area that we're looking at, and that's the area that will actually have the roadway improvements as well from the I-205 improvements project. Next slide. There's been a lot of questions about what will the toll rates be, and we don't really know yet because the Oregon Transportation Commission is actually going to set the toll rates at some point here in the future, but we did have to make some assumptions in order to do the analysis for the environmental assessment. And so we've used, it's a variable toll rate, and we've used from around 60 cents to roughly $2 as the range. And, the high range would be during the peak hours or the most congested periods. And that's consistent with trying to do congestion pricing. And then the low range would be at those off-peak times. So, and you would know the rate, before you travel. It would be set for different time periods. And because you've got two gantries set, relatively far apart, you only pay for the ones you go under. So conceivably your trip, if you're just going to Tualatin to West Lynn, you get off at Oregon 43, then you just pay one toll because you go under the one toll gantry. But if you're going all the way through, then you would pay at each of those toll points. And there will be a program. It's still under discussion and how it's going to actually work. But for people that are low income population, there'll be a program to make the toll more affordable for them. So some of our initial results that we've gotten, we can share here. And this is a colorful map that shows travel times along a variety of routes. So each color is a different route. And then the boxes show the comparison of with the project compared to without the project. So when you see 4 minutes faster, like if you look at the teal light blue line, that's I-205 between I-5 and Gladstone. And you see that it's 4 minutes faster southbound. And it's also 4 minutes faster northbound. And that's with the project. So the project, and you've widened the roadway, you've added capacity, and you've also told so that you've kind of discouraged peak usage of that facility in some cases. Makes sense that it's faster. So we've also looked at some of the routes off of 205. And a lot of these, you'll see minimal to no change in terms of with the project versus without it. Some, though, like Oregon 43 southbound, you see that gets a bit slower, about 3 minutes slower. And then on 99E southbound also gets a bit slower, about 3 minutes. And just kind of added information, the bulk of that 3 minutes really is right through the Oregon City area. South of there's not much change. And then northbound, it actually gets about 4 minutes faster. And the bulk of that is kind of south in the south end near Canby. That's the morning. And then the afternoon, you actually see some bigger changes, and especially on 205. This is where, because the afternoon rush hour is in general more congested than the morning rush hour. It's gotten even more so with COVID, but even before COVID, it was. So you see a real improvement in travel time. Southbound 7 minutes faster, which is probably about 25% improvement in travel time on I-205. Again, the teal boxes there. And northbound, you see, up to 15 minutes faster in the PM rush hour, and that's over a 50% reduction in travel time. So that's really significant. And then on other, surrounding roadways, we see either no change, or in a couple places we actually see improvements as well. So on the PMs on Oregon 43, the green box there, in the green route, it's 4 minutes faster southbound. And then Willamette Falls Drive, it's actually Borland Road and Willamette Falls Drive. We see eastbound is it gets faster as well.
And just real quick, I know this group really interested in what happens on Borland Road. The reason why we're seeing little to no change there is because people aren't like the tolls are east of that, so people aren't trying to use that to gain an advantage. If they were going to kind of route themselves around the gantries, it would be more getting on at Stafford Road and heading east. And so we are looking further because we do have some concerns about what we're seeing at the Borland Road and 65th, or sorry, Borland Road and Stafford Road intersection and that interchange. So that is an area where we don't have the data today, but in the next few months, that's what we'll be working on, kind of more fine tuning and looking into on what's actually happening on Stafford Road and that exit kind of north and south at Borland.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, we are doing a much more in-depth look at Stafford Road right through there.
Yep.
And so the analysis for the environmental assessment is comparing, okay, what's happening if you do nothing, and then what happens if you implement this project, and do things get better or worse? And if things get worse, then we need to look at how do you mitigate that. We're looking at a lot of different topic areas, a lot of different places where we can measure the changes and see if they get better or worse. And this is just a few of them. It's by no means all of them, but you mentioned travel time, which you just saw some. We're looking at safety benefits. We're looking at how it affects freight, how it affects air quality and noise, how it affects equity populations. And also, what is the toll rate revenue that we can expect from this? And of course, the big one is diversion. What kind of diversion are we looking at? Both.
And sorry, Chris, I would say just to build on that last piece of, I know a lot in your resolution, it listed out, ODOT's not considering these factors, or we want to see how this is addressed. And I think what you're seeing here is that we don't have the definitive plans on paper because we're working towards that June draft environmental assessment. And so that's where we're really going to work out the details and put at least the first run of how we see these elements that you see here on the screen being addressed. And specifically one we're starting to work on now, more so, and the feedback in your letter and from the other cities that we're getting is on what's the long-term plan for monitoring, and what are the costs associated with that. So once the tolls are in place, it's not a set it and forget it, but what is ODOT going to do to work with the cities long-term on that? So your type of feedback on what elements should we be including in there has been super helpful.
Agreed. So this map here shows the kind of the study area for the transportation analysis. It's the area of potential impact. And you see that it stretches west to Tualatin, stretches east to Gladstone, up to Lake Oswego, and down to Canby, Aurora. And within that study area, we've identified 50 intersections to do detailed analysis at, both before, with and without the project to see what the impacts are. 3 of those intersections are in Tualatin, 65th and Borland, and then the Nyberg Road interchange, the 2 intersections with the I-5 ramps there. And we have identified these intersections with input from local jurisdictions, so we looked and saw where we thought traffic might shift and change and might affect intersections. And then we got input from various jurisdictions and other partners on where they thought we should look as well. And so that's how we came up with the 50 intersections. And the next step, we're doing the analysis on these intersections now. And once we identify where we're seeing some impacts, then the next step is to work with the local communities to identify how we can mitigate that and what makes the most sense. Because, there's more than one solution to every problem. So there may be some options there in terms of how to mitigate an impact.
Yeah, and I see the way to connect in. I know, Councilor Pratt, you've been attending the C4 diversion subcommittee meetings. So it's those meetings, those monthly meetings is where we see some of this information coming forward and being shared and talking about where do we see mitigation, what are the options, what do people want to do. And then if there are kind of one of those three intersections in Tualatin that we see needs mitigated, then that would be a conversation we'd reach out to Sherilyn and Kim, Mike McCarthy, others like that to help talk through, what's happening on those local roads in those areas. So all that is coming here within the next few months as we ramp up to that June timeframe.
Yep. And back to you, Garrett.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So we take Chris's really smart brain and great transportation analysis work that their team is on, and we run it through what's called social resources, environmental justice. It basically looks at how is access to schools, nursing homes, medical facilities like dialysis centers, parks and green spaces, how are those all being impacted by the tolling project? Again, that information, we're studying that now. That's coming forward here soon in June. That's going to be my response for a couple of these things, but that's just kind of where we're at in the process. I know specifically here, I saw Ms. Nowak was here and Mayor Bubenik. We had worked on trying to get more dollars for funding transit and transportation options when I was in Tualatin in this area. So what you see here on the map is just a high level of the very deep inventory of what's on the books today. What does SMART and TriMet, Ride Connection, Clackamas County, what do they envision for the transit and transportation solutions going forward? Especially in this area, we've also been talking to carpooling and van pooling folks. Portland area van pools, we have are much smaller compared to other cities the same size of ours in the United States. And so what could we do to ramp up that program? So that's all getting collected in what's called an I-205 transit multimodal corridor strategy. And then the toll project, again, coming here in June, that'll be the first look at what does ODOT commit to deliver with partners for the 205 toll project to increase those options for folks in this area and to provide that relief from tolling. So to give a little more specificity to what Chris said about what is that program for low income, people experiencing low income, and specifically we're looking at some of the tricky questions around if you're a person who's experiencing low income, you might not be at that income all year long. You might go above and below. So how do we deal with that variability? How do we deal with the variability of shift workers who are, minimum wage or just above that and can't change from that time that they go through? So those are the questions we're working on investigating. We're looking at what's happening around the United States and what other programs have done. So by September of 2022, we'll have an ODOT report on what are those options, what are ODOT's recommendations for what program should be put in place for that. And then specifically zooming into the 205, because I know you mentioned about Tualatin's Latino population and how that analysis hasn't been conducted. Again, that's where that we are doing that. I'll kind of point to that June draft EA, where you'll see everything on the right side of the screen: seniors, youth, people experiencing a disability, limited English speaking households. We'll look through all of that same impacts and benefits analysis for each one of these groups as well. And so, again, it's coming. That's the kind of the work that we've committed to doing and that you'll see show up in that document. So I think that's plenty of information and talking from us, but our discussion questions we'd love to hear from you today on, in addition to any other kind of questions or comments you had. But how can this be seen as a benefit to Tualatin residents from tolling? How do we realize the benefits of time savings and reliability, but address those impacts? And then when we do have this real treasure trove of information that we want to get feedback on and input on in June, what are creative ways, what are the best ways that we can work with you all to help roll that information out and get feedback on it? Because that's a draft environmental assessment. It's not the final. The final would happen later in this year. So that'll be a key time for input. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Going to open the floor of questions, but I'll just start off with very much appreciate the presentation. This is the latest and greatest updates are very informative. You answered a lot of the questions we asked last time, but I'm going to open the floor. But thank you very much for some of these answers. Some of the stuff is brand new. I haven't seen since Washington County coordinating 2 weeks ago. So thank you very much on that. So questions for Garrett and Team ODOT. Councilor Pratt.
No. Yeah, thank you for this information. Like, I'm really glad to see, like on the low income that I know that was asked to include older adults, and I'm seeing you're putting some of the stuff you've heard into this. So I really appreciate that. I missed a little section there and I apologize, but when Chris was going through how the times would be faster on 205 and there's really not much increase on the outside roads in 2045, what's going to happen? Is it just because of people going at different times because on the roads, or why is there less traffic? Why is there such a little effect? Or
Yeah. Chris, do you want to start on that, and then I can help you?
Sure. So the reason that speeds improve so much on 205 is, we've added a lane, so we've added capacity to it, and we've tolled it. So in a lot of the time periods, that pushes people away from 205, right? Except in those really, really congested time periods when the alternate route is so congested that it's worth it for a traveler to stay on 205 and pay that toll because they're going to get a reliable, fast trip. So what we're seeing as far as impacts to the local streets around 205 is we are seeing some rerouting occurring. Well, a number of things. We're seeing people diverting. Some people are switching their time of day, kind of outside of that peak. So that's reducing some of that volume. And then we're seeing that people tend to reroute more when the surrounding streets are not as congested. So, like late night time, rather than pay a toll, they'll take a surface street because it's pretty free flowing. During the peaks, when we do see some rerouting, and there are some streets that experience some congestion because of that, or a little more congestion. But we're also seeing that in 2045, with a do nothing scenario, those streets are already pretty congested. So we're not seeing a huge change because of the project. But we are, we're seeing some effects at intersections. There's some that we haven't completed. I think Garrett mentioned the Stafford Road. We're still looking at that in more detail. So that's still to come. But there's a few other intersections in Oregon City that we're seeing are being impacted that we'll need to do something about. But it's not as dramatic as I think maybe some people thought, ahead of time when they said, "Oh my God, if you toll the facility, everybody will divert to other roadways." And we see some of that, but we see other things happening also.
so I've heard, and I think this is because we have such a concern about diversion, especially during that time frame when you're tolling I-205 and not the rest of the corridor. We're really concerned about diversion at that time frame. And I've heard you're doing a study of the impacts in 2027, which I think would be much more useful. And I just wanted to confirm if that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah, we are looking at 2027. Our intent is to do a more targeted look to see, what were we seeing in 2045 and where were the major shifts and potential impacts. And we'd look at those in 2027 as well to see, what happens early on, right after you've made these improvements and put the toll in place.
Okay. And then I guess I'll go back. You pointed out we have 3 intersections, but the one I like to target on is 65th and Borland because I believe that is a city road. And you've shown that I know there's going to be diversion on that, and you're well aware that Wilsonville is building housing, so that will probably increase the diversion. And it's great if we get your help to do a mitigation project, but that will still be a city road. And I'm wondering if any of these tolling fees in the future, once the bridge and the extra lane are paid for, if any of those will come to the city to help maintain that road.
I defer to Garrett on that one.
Yeah, I think that. So I think what you're going to hear from like ODOT, Oregon Transportation Commission, that's that Oregon. It's a call by the Oregon Transportation Commission on where do the toll dollars go, kind of in the future, in that future system. I think what you're hearing from our kind of the staff level, like the people like Heather and myself and others, is that we know that's a decision that needs to be made in the future. So what are those factors that we need to consider? And so we've heard that in the resolution that y'all passed, and what we've heard from some of the other Clackamas County cities is a good list of what are those factors ODOT should be considering long term, as far as that diversion monitoring and what's going on locally and the needs from the new traffic patterns. I think that's good. Like we don't have an answer for you today, but I think what you're doing now and raising up those needs on what needs to be accounted for is the right thing, and is something we'll capture and bring forward to the decision makers.
And I do want to validate that yes, that intersection does show up as not failing standard, both in the no build and the build in the future.
Right.
So it's definitely a problem intersection.
And then my last question has to do with the funding, because for I-205, I know ODOT's taken the stance that this tolling revenue or leveraging off of it's needed for these projects, but the IIJA and the HB 3055 could have diversified this and got this going earlier and let us do the whole corridor. So is that just a decision ODOT's made, or where are we at with that?
Yeah, sure. Good question. And that Heather walked through that a little bit at the beginning, but I'll kind of build on it. So the IIJA, that's the new federal dollars that just came in with the 400 million of those are statewide, would be discretionary. So could be used kind of on different projects. So the Oregon Transportation Commission has been going through what are some scenarios of where we could spend these dollars. But they received a letter specifically from Clackamas County and the cities to do what you just said, Councilor Pratt, shift some of these dollars over to delay the 205. And their response back to that was that they don't, there's enough needs other places in the state that they're seeing, and concerns they're hearing from people all over on where these kind of really specific these dollars that can be used are going. And so that they are not going to basically take the dollars from this pot, this 400 million, to help move over to delay the toll project, because they see that the plan where the toll project is moving along, and that's used to fill in the kind of later year financing for this first $375 million that goes out, is what is kind of their plan for how those dollars would be used. Now, HB 3055 did allow ODOT to take what was just 30 million to Rose Corridor and use that to bring over to the 205 improvements project and get that started quicker than it would have been. And it also allowed ODOT to take dollars from that 30 million to the Rose Corridor over to Boone Bridge to get that started quicker than that would have been as well. So you get that part of HB 3055, but even in moving those dollars over from 3055 to get the 205 improvements started, there's not enough dollars from HB 3055 to fully kind of make that first contract on the 205 improvements whole without tolling in that plan.
Okay, well, thank you for coming tonight.
Yeah, definitely.
Other questions? Council Brooks and Council President Grimes and Councilor Sacco.
Hi, Garrett. Nice to see you again. Thanks for the presentation. And I'm not sure if Counselor Pratt's, I lost track a little bit if she asked this question or not. But when one of the things that really jumped out to me was the map of where the study was, and it goes down really far south, but that just cuts off the Wilsonville entrance and exit. And I'm just curious why that's not included, because as you probably are quite aware, it's just gotten terrible along Boone's Ferry already. So I just don't see, which goes right in front of 3 of our schools. So to cut that out of the conversation, to me, just feels a little incomplete.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. So in these larger environmental review documents, there's a bunch of different study areas. The study areas are kind of for the data that you're studying. So for our study of accessibility to jobs and schools, that's a larger footprint, which does include Wilsonville. So that'll be a part of this document coming forward. The map you saw today was more just on like where the traffic flow is going and intersections. And Chris, I know we determined that with input from Tualatin and other cities, but the boundaries of that's set from when we kind of looked at the regional model and we saw what the plus and minus and shift was. And at least based on that regional model, Councillor Brooks, I don't think we were seeing a huge plus or minus at the, I'm trying to think, the Ellingson exit or down there around Boone's Ferry and Wilsonville. Now when we study tolling on I-5, that's definitely an area we're gonna be looking at. But at least for this I-205 toll project, when we ran the numbers on regional impact, we weren't seeing a big enough delta, a big enough plus minus to include it in the purple footprint that you saw tonight.
Okay. And then I'm kind of curious, we've talked a lot about pricing for individuals. I'm just trying to get my head around how this impacts people that live here. And then we have local freight from our city. Then we have interstate freight. And, you know, I just know some of the conversation is around people here paying their taxes for roads and then paying again for tolls. So I'm curious, and maybe not tonight, but in the future, of information around commercial traffic and how they're being charged. With my business, we can do write-offs, but people that do all this commuting here to work, that are hourly wage folks that, and I know that you addressed it, they're gonna, you know, it looks to me like a very regressive tax on some of the people that are coming here to work. And so I'm just really concerned about those guys. And I know it's on your radar, but I just want to say that and say that I'm very interested in that information about how much we're holding up, how much interstate is holding this up, how much local commercial traffic is holding this up, and the like. I guess my other comment is around tying the tolling project to the Abernathy Bridge. You know, I read that article in the Willamette Week, and there's that differentiation, and people have talked to me about this big delay that's going to be down in the Rose Quarter, and why can't some of that money be diverted to this project instead of tolling our citizens for just using the roads. So that's a question I've got.
Yeah, quickly. Well, one thought on, I think it would be great to work with yourselves and others here on that outreach in June and July when we have a lot of this good economic data impact to businesses. So helping set up conversations in Tualatin about those impacts and benefits would be great. I think some of the Rose Corridor dollars, just a quick answer on that is that it's not flexible within ODOT. It's been directed by the legislature. I know not this session, but I think the previous legislative session, Representative Pruzak had proposed some legislation to move those around. And you saw that wasn't successful, basically. And so I think that's, I guess, a little bit of the political reality of where we're at. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
President Grimes.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation tonight. It's always better for us to get more information than less information, so thank you. I had a question. When you were showing the travel maps and the increase or decrease of travel time based on the tolling, was one done on I-5?
That map didn't show I-5, but Chris, I know in the regional, we have looked at I-5 because we ran a map the first round of transportation analysis is the entire region. And so we had looked at impacts there. Do you know off the top of your head, Chris? Because is that what you're asking for, Council President? Just like impacts that way?
We actually, I know we probably did that. It was probably the more refined DTA model. It was with the regional model. We did look at a section of I-5 when we were doing the freight mobility analysis. So we do have that in the transportation technical report. I don't have that right at my fingertips, but I could find it here in probably a few minutes. So a fairly short section of I-5, just kind of south of 205 to north of 205, maybe 2-3 mile stretch we looked at.
Okay, yeah, I would love to see what the thoughts are with that, because for us, we're sort of uniquely positioned. We're like squished between I-5 and 205 with lots of east-west cut through ways that people can go. And for us, I mean, congestion on I-5 is absolutely as deadly as 99W or 43 or even 205, because right now we have a crippling problem with 65th being the reroute for I-5 either direction, and it's crippling, literally. So I think we need to be as cognizant of what happens with I-5 in the section that impacts this city, everything from almost Haynes Road down to the first Wilsonville exit. I mean, that whole section, that impacts us dreadfully. If anything happens there, it takes an already difficult situation and makes it horrible. So I would definitely like to see some of those figures if they're available. My second question was, you mentioned 3 intersections in Tualatin would be studied, one of which would be 65th and Borland. Did you mention the other 2, or are they still up for discussion? Because I didn't see what the other 2 would be.
They're actually Nyberg Street and
Yep.
the interchange there with I-5, and basically those 2 ramp intersections with Nyberg Street are the other 2.
Okay. Because I guess my question about that would be 65th and Borland is really crucial because, like I said, we've got the 65th issue and then the Borland problem. But then, I have deep concerns about Borland and Stafford where they intersect on the roundabout, because as it stands now, you try to travel east on Borland between 3 to say 5:30, 6 o'clock on any given night, that roundabout may be backed up, clear to Rolling Hills Church west. So to me, that's a super important intersection, and it's already, especially if you speak with Lake Oswego and you look what happens to them coming down the hill there. It cripples them the same way that it does us, and it just completely destroys the ability to get from, our side of the city over into West Lynn, or, even down to 205. So I would wonder if we could maybe include that particular intersection in some of the ones that we look at. I know it's not technically in our city limits, but it impacts the lives of our residents pretty severely.
Yeah, and that intersection is included in our
Is?
now. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's one that we're taking an even more detailed look at, because we're looking at all the intersections along Stafford between, I think, Mountain Road and Rosemont.
Okay. Yeah, and then you mentioned that Borland specifically, that some of the estimates were done on a DTA model. Is that where you actually put the stripping down on the road and you count traffic at different times of day? Or is that just an assumptive model? How does that work?
It's so Metro runs a regional model. It's a regional demand model, and that it basically just identifies trips in the region and where they're going along the roadways. And a DTA model, and I apologize for the acronyms, but a dynamic traffic assignment model, it also does that. It says, okay, there's so many trips being made in the region, and they're going to take these different routes. What it does, though, is it takes into account how congested a route is and signalize intersections, and if there's backups and cues that impact another intersection. So it does a better job of showing what will happen during very congested conditions. And so that's the model that we're using to look at this sub area. So it's a computer model.
Okay, so it kind of sounds like a lot of generalities assigned to a specific road. And the reason that I'm asking that is that Borland is so, to me, it's like specifically unusual, where we have a giant hospital, we have 3 schools, we have kind of an enormous mega church. And I'm wondering, is there a way that rather than using a generalized model, we could use actual trip counts on that road for different days of the week and different times of the day? Because, super simple things like when church lets out, you can't get onto Borland. You just can't. And, and when we have days of the week that are commute dates, 65th backs up. So then Borland, if you're traveling west on Borland, it's very difficult to make a left-hand turn to go, south on 65th. I just think there's so many things that are so specific that we're doing ourselves a disservice by taking just a generalized model to that particular street.
Yeah, can I just 2 things real quick, Chris? So one of the things, Councilor Grant, we do is we have a whole batch of like Bluetooth data of actual like real live where people traveled in this area called Streetlight, and that's been helping inform these larger generalized models. But how we're building into this kind of impacts analysis is we rely on the computers and the modeling and the planning, but so much until we really get down to crafting what are those impacts and what are those solutions ODOT should bring to the table. And that's where we will go out and talk to folks to really get kind of the people side of it. Because you can only plan for something so much, or a computer model can only tell you so much. You really do need to ground truth it. Now, whether that's like people reporting back individual traffic counts, I don't know if we've talked about that specifically yet. But if that is an interview with like folks at the Borland Free Clinic or folks there at the hospital at the 65th intersection, that's that type of stuff we're building into our schedule and our work.
Yeah. And I do want to say that we collect traffic counts all over the area, and we actually calibrate that model
Mhm.
to replicate what's going on, on in the real world. But like you say, it's still a model, and that's why I think the idea of monitoring things after this is put in place makes a whole lot of sense.
I appreciate your answer and I hear what you're saying, but again, here's my problem with that is the idea is once things are put in place, then we're going to start this monitoring and get real specific. And I'm saying, well, hold on here. I think now is the time to start gathering that information and being specific before we move ahead yet one more step, because I feel like we're sort of being crushed under this giant wheel that wants to keep moving forward. And the solution and the answer and everything is going to be at the end of this process. Well, maybe the process isn't quite going to the right end. And I don't always like being put off too far in the future with these concerns that I think are very, very, very valid and very concerning. And I think it could be catastrophic for the city if this rolls out incorrectly. I mean, the entire east side of our city will be a even more gridlock disaster than it is. And as it is now, that's untenable at certain times. You add rerouting, and I feel like, this is, potential disaster. So, but yeah, any specifics we can gather, I would be greatly appreciative of.
Definitely. And I think this first step here in June with the draft DA is the first step towards putting more definition to what that looks like in the future, ongoing and leading up to it, because we definitely don't see this as a kind of distracted wheel of crushing. We see it as something we kind of build as we're going along here with y'all. So
Great, thank you, Garrett. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I hope I don't sound disrespectful because I don't mean.
No,
to,
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I have one last question, and I'm sorry, I'll be quiet. But the tolling area where it's presented now, I'm getting the impression from everything that I've read that that is going to be a fixed tolling area in perpetuity. Even after the associated projects are funded for that stretch of road or even the stretch of 205 going even more north. That being the case, it starts to feel to me that this permanent towing or tolling corridor, it's going to be on our backs to start funding regional transportation projects. And that just does not feel good. And if I'm wrong, please disabuse me of the notion that I have that that's what's going to happen going forward. Especially when I hear you say that we can't even perhaps start, targeting and pinpointing transportation projects locally that we're going to have that are going to perhaps be exacerbated by this tolling. We can't even earmark dollars to come back to us to fix this problem with this permanent tolling zone that is going to be the cash cow for a lot of other projects that are not going to be, zone neighborhood specific for ourselves, Lake Oswego, Oregon City, West Lynn. I mean, if I'm wrong, please tell me, because I'll feel so much better if that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, a couple of thoughts on it. One, in HB 2017, leading back a few years ago, you've got these major projects. You've got the Interstate Bridge up on I-5, the Rose Corridor Project, Boone Bridge, I-205 improvements. Each one of these projects range from 500 million to just over $1 billion. Huge projects. And so where are the dollars that are going to come to pay that? We got from the legislature, we have $30 million a year that can kind of be spread throughout those. But really, it said that tolling, this by regional congestion pricing look, was the other major funding source for that. So I think that's one of the things we see. We know kind of today that's one of the roles that tolling will fulfill. And we've got from the Oregon Transportation Commission that the dollars collected on the corridor stay invested in which they're going. So for the toll, if you're driving over, like you're saying, that in perpetuity tolling on 205, those dollars are going back to that corridor. Now, this is where I think the piece where the wheel isn't too far down the path and we can build, I'll use that analogy, we can build spokes into that wheel and pieces of it, is identifying what are those transit and multimodal projects, what are those local projects that needs to be included once you go into that toll rate setting process. And where that happens is through these environmental review documents. So again, coming here in June, this is kind of ODOT's first look and take at what are they going to commit to delivering with this toll project. And so that's where I think that list of requests and projects and things that you want to see delivered with tolling can happen. Soon after that, we'll have a regional mobility pricing project, and that environmental review process will start up, and the same process where decisions will kind of be made along the way, or commitments on what's delivered with the tolling project. Heather, I see you came off. Do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit more on the environmental assessment process and the comment period. Often what we end up getting are comments that are like, we hate the project, we don't like this, and those aren't, we typically respond with comment noted, thank you. It's super helpful. And what these comment periods are actually intended for is to get information back from like that we may have missed, like questions that you have. And I know really specific examples where we've done analysis and looked at things based on the comments that we receive. So being really thoughtful about where you're seeing deficiencies in information, where it doesn't seem quite right, where you think there's an impact and there's mitigation that you think might be helpful. Those types of comments are super, super helpful for us. And we really do like review them and think about them. We talk about how we're gonna address them through modeling and other things. So just putting another plug in there for that comment period that Garrett was talking about, like it's really intended to get that information back, to have that two-way conversation.
So you can assure us then that this 205 section of tolling is not going to bear part of the burden of an interstate bridge, the Rose Quarter work.
Correct. Yep. Interstate Bridge, that's its own bi-state funding set up. The tolling dollars go there for that improvement. The Rose Corridor improvements, if there were tolling dollars that come with that, that would come from the I-5 corridor. So, yeah.
And just to put a finer point on, on the two locations that we're talking about, on the Tualatin Bridge and the Abernathy, that money will go toward the I-205 improvements project. It won't go toward anything else until that is paid off. And so any mitigation, any projects that are part of that 205 project, that will all be paid with those 205 toll.
And then once those projects are satisfied, tolling won't go away or move to a different portion of the transportation system. It won't shift to I-5. It won't shift more southerly to deal with the Boones Bridge. It just stays slap in our backyard, even when our commitments are met.
I'd say one, that's kind of to be determined by the Oregon Transportation Commission. I think what you'll see, like that's the kind of the system and then the monitoring that's set in place. That with a lot of these toll projects, there's report back systems. There's kind of a measurements on what do you think the toll rate's trying to accomplish. I think the one thing where you see the idea of using tolling for congestion pricing. So the benefit of that is that if you build that third lane on 205 in each direction, you're not guessing at kind of how much time does that buy us to alleviate congestion. You can actually use the toll rate to then kind of manage that demand to make sure that investment isn't just a 10-year win for us in alleviating congestion, but that really is in perpetuity. So that's kind of the intent of why tolling would continue to be in place. Maybe not to pay for another $700 million bridge, but to better manage congestion around those times. So maybe there could be a different toll rate than if you're trying to pay for a $700 capital project as well with it. You know, there could be trade-offs there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Sacco. We're running out of time, so.
I'll be quick, and I think most counselors already addressed what I had on my list. And so I'll just quickly run through. I'm really concerned about the tolling impact on our businesses. And I think Councilor Brooks hit on that. But just, you know, we have Bridgeport, we have our businesses in our downtown area, and I worry about them not getting as much business because folks aren't going to want to pay the tolls to get to Tualatin. If they take 205, or they're not going to want to drive around the freeway system, or it's just going to be so congested that they, you know, they just don't make the trip to Tualatin. So that's one of my concerns. And what I heard you said earlier is that, you know, that'll be addressed in reports coming up in the June, July timeframe. So I'm looking forward to seeing information about that. And Councilor President Grimes, I think, hit on this one. Basically, why wait until the bad intersections get worse before we're addressing them? And then we're going to be doing, you know, adding more stress on the system by doing constructions in these intersections. So I really worry about, we're going to take a bad intersection, make it worse, and then have even more pain points by adding construction. So I'm really concerned about that instead of addressing those issues up front, so we can be more mobile without adding more congestion. And then both of these next points might be addressed by this larger regional map that was discussed, but two specific points on that concerns me is one, our bridges. We are a city that we need those bridges to get from in our case, west to east. And if we have, you know, the Abernathy Bridge that's being tolled, I think people are going to look for other avenues to get across the river. So I'm really concerned about the Oregon City Bridge. I take that bridge quite often now to get around the freeway system, and it's bad now. I can't imagine what it's going to look like in the future. And then Selwood Bridge, which I haven't heard be discussed tonight. Also concerned about Selwood Bridge. So I'd like to see information on the impact to the bridges that we expect. And then lastly, Ellingson, 65th and Stafford, that little area also didn't hear mentioned. So sorry if I missed that, but that can be a nightmare, is a nightmare as well. So seeing that intersection on a list somewhere to be addressed would be super important for me as well.
Definitely. I think a lot of those places you hit on are places we've looked into or are going to, so we can put up together some information and get it back to you.
Councilor Hillier.
Thank you. I'll just divert just a tiny bit. I appreciate all my previous the counselors' questions, and I learned a lot that were on my list already. But I'm wondering, with your list, you showed a list of groups that you were going to still get some information from: low income, limited English, senior citizens, that sort of thing. And I'm just wondering how your results are going to direct and inform your work that may change from what you have today, or are you pushing that into the environmental report that we'll see in June and July? And then my only other comment or question is really, you know, how are you going to evaluate the success or not of this? And when and if will you be willing to pivot from things or make corrections? And so maybe today's not the day for those questions, though.
No, I think quickly, Councilor Hillier, we've really been working for the last year and a half. So, because the data only tells you so much about seniors, youth, you know, minority ethnic communities, that type of thing. We have folks that are, it's part of a community engagement liaison services. So these are in these different communities, in each one of kind of those subgroups that I'm talking about, people that have been paid and have been working with us to bring us input back to the project and inform the types of analysis and the impacts we're looking at. So I think what you'll see here in June, again, is kind of us reporting out of what is what Chris was explaining, what's happening in the transportation modeling world as far as like access to schools and medical facilities and all that. And then what have we heard actually from people in those groups about how they see those impacts actually happening? And is that impact in discerning for equity is it at the same level that the general population is receiving or not? Or are there differences as far as in how a certain subgroup is receiving a benefit or an impact compared to the general population? Because our hope in advancing equity is to provide disproportionate benefit to those groups that we listed there in our equity framework areas.
I'm just gonna, it's not even a question, it's a comment because I'm running out of time. And I always have access to you, Garrett, and through other means, so I can find out my questions there. But the one thing I do want to follow up on, and Councilor Sacco mentioned it, and I think we all did, mitigating the diversion and the timeline for that, moving up that study from 2045 to 2027 has got to happen. And then, I look at, okay, you say the study comes in June, July, we all realize, oh man, Borland's going to be a nightmare, or 65th and it's going to be a nightmare, or the traffic circle is going to be a nightmare. Addressing that issue, you say, oh yeah, now we got to fix it. I look at Tualatin Sherwood Road, which was supposed to be fixed how long ago? There's still not one shovel has hit Tualatin Sherwood Road, even though it was an MSTIP approved. There's engineering, and it was supposed to be done by now. And we're still in engineering. So even if we do get money to fix Borland, 65th, Stafford Road, it's years away because Tualatin Sherwood Road has been a priority for over 10 years under Mayor Ogden, and it's still not done. So that's my rant because I got to move on. I'll follow up with you folks later on and ODOT folks, but I do appreciate the information. I do appreciate every time a presentation is given, it's more and more informative. I think you are starting to listen to the concerns of the community. So, kudos for that. And I look forward to the next presentation because I know you got a challenging JPAC presentation in March. So that's going to be an exciting meeting to watch.
Definitely.
So
thanks all. Yeah,
all
this
right.
is excellent to walk through all this. Thanks for taking time. I'll have Mr. Taylor shorten his stuff up. He'll get to the point for you.
He'll talk fast.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming tonight. Very much appreciated.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye, all.
Bye-bye. Nice meeting you, Chris.
Likewise.
All right. So next up, we have prosperity planning, the core opportunity and reinvestment area, discussion led by Jonathan Taylor. And I see Elaine Howard. Welcome, Elaine. Can't hear you, Jonathan.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I know how you love that headset.
I was trying to hide it. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council. Tonight I'm with Elaine Howard. We are bringing you up to speed and also getting a little bit more feedback on the prosperity planning efforts that we have. Council directed us 3 years ago to look at the Commons area, the I-5 corridor, and see what we could do to meet some council objectives of housing, transportation, environmental stewardship, and such. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Cancel. All right. So real quick, I know we've got a little bit shorter time frame, but what this process has been, it's been a multi-year endeavor to secure our position, our community's position for long-term economic prosperity. With COVID and how that dramatically changed our landscape, it further prioritized these efforts. We understood from 2018 and 2019's work from the HNA and EOA through Tualatin 2040 that with community growth, development constraints present long-term challenges for our community's prosperity. The availability of developable land and transportation infrastructure is severely limited or restricted. And in addition, the transition to electronic commerce and current supply chain issues that have resulted from the COVID-19 pandemic will present both opportunities and challenges for the future. So really what we're trying to do is to utilize a variety of funding tools to meet the community needs in alignment with the broader community vision. And Elaine and I are going to tag team this presentation tonight, so we might interject over one another.
A little background on where we have been. As Jonathan said, you had your EOA and HNA completed in 2018. In 2019, we worked with the council on an education series to discuss urban renewal and what new is happening in urban renewal and what the potential could be for Tualatin. And at the same time, the city council decided to officially close the Central Urban Renewal District. In 2020, we completed 2 feasibility studies, the one for the Southwest and Basalt Creek area and the one for more the central downtown area. In 2021, we did an amendment to the Leventon plan to identify projects. Before that, there was some work with the community on what those projects might be. City Council chose a project. We started on the Southwest and Basalt Creek plan, and it was adopted. And then we're starting to look at in 2021 just what the visioning and what the effort should be in a potential additional urban renewal area. We're in the 2022 timeframe, which is actually looking at that District 2 area and defining the boundary, the types of projects that you want to use. So in the Leventon area, you are now in the midst of a multi-year project to expand the Herman Road and to add multimodal components and enhance traffic flow and safety. And the proposed project is anticipated to cost about $3 million. And then the Southwest and Basalt Creek area was established as a 717-acre investment area. It has allocated up to about $55 million for projects within that area over the time frame of the area. And these projects will help fund identified infrastructure projects that will encourage greenfield land development. Next slide. So now we're going to talk more about the core opportunity reinvestment area, which is what we used to call District 2, what it now is being called the core area work. So there has been a lot of strategic work within that area. The Central Urban Renewal District Plan was adopted in 1979, updated in 2009 with the goal to strengthen social and economic development of Central Tualatin by stabilizing and improving property values and eliminating blight, preventing future blight, and to encourage and facilitate land uses that result in activity during all business hours, evenings, nights, weekends, and to encourage indoor and outdoor uses. There were also the Central Tualatin Design Standards in 2001, with the goal to provide a document for future development that creates an urban central city identity and a strong multimodal network with connections to the river and fostering a rich diversity of multi-use development. The Town Center Plan was adopted in 2005, and its goal was to strategically plan for a town center that will have distinctive, high-quality, mixed-use development and a wide variety of residential dwellings and retail, professional, and service employment opportunities and important recreational and cultural facilities. The 2009 was the Tualatin Tomorrow effort. That goal is to complete community, a place where children thrive and people connect, neighbors know and care for one another, and community members are proud of their city and quality of life that is second to none. The Transportation System Plan was completed in 2014. Its goal was to establish a long-range vision for the combination of projects, programs, and policies that will achieve Tualatin's transportation goals. The Parks and Recreation Master Plan was completed in 2019. Its goal was to create a vibrant city and a healthy and cohesive community connected through attractive parks, diverse facilities, trails, conservation of natural areas, recreation opportunities, and culture that are engaging and accessible to all. Next slide. So a lot of work has been done. Because of our time frame, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. We can come back to any of them if you want, but this is the town commons. That was a 19-acre area public-private mixed-use redevelopment that was in the former downtown urban renewal area. That development produced a promenade, public plaza, hotel, office, residential areas, and of course the lake. Next slide. Another large investment in Tualatin was the Bridgeport Village in 2005. It was a $250 million 7-year redevelopment of a former rock quarry. Between 2010 and 2022, Whole Foods, REI, and the Grand Hotel opened along the Southwest Bridgeport Road, and Bridgeport Village has an estimated 1,000 employees. Next slide. Nyberg Woods was developed in 2007. Once the site of a former motel, the redevelopment constructed 250,000 square feet with 3 main anchor buildings and 2 smaller retail shops buildings. Due to the site being severely restricted, significant retaining walls were used along Nyberg Street. The West Commuter Rail occurred in 2009. This 14.7-mile suburb-to-suburb commuter rail service opened in February of 2009. The line has a total of 5 stations with terminus in both Beaverton and Wilsonville and 4 park and rides. The project cost was $161 million and took 13 years to complete. Next slide. Nyberg Rivers is the $65 million redevelopment of the vacant Kmart building and the demolition of Jiggles and 4 new buildings for the tenants of Cabela's, New Season, LA Fitness, and several retail and fast food options. It has an estimated 600 employees. Next slide. So the area that we're looking at future investment for is the Core Opportunity and Reinvestment Area Plan. The vision for that is it will be a guiding document in our community's efforts to establish and fund projects to create an active civic core, redevelop areas with vibrant, high-quality, mixed-use developments offering a variety of additional residential dwelling and retail options, increase opportunities for living wage, professional, and creative employment to promote and develop recreational and cultural facilities, and integrate all efforts into the natural landscape with environmental stewardship. This is the proposed working vision statement and will be refined both with your input and with input from a working group. Next slide.
So we come here tonight because over the last several years, especially last year during our small group briefings with each of you, you outline a couple of key values, but then also top priorities. Through those listening sessions, both with you and also with the public, we heard very clear that we want more housing. We don't want to leave any existing businesses behind. In order to make the area both not just the town center, but other areas within the proposed reinvestment area, you want to enhance connectivity. We heard a lot about we want to foster, create, and promote an identity for the area. And then obviously we want to maintain and grow existing employment lands. Within those discussions, also council pointed out that they had 7 priorities that eventually will turn into investments that we do if this plan is passed. So right now, we've taken the feedback that we've gotten and we've come up with these that I think incorporate and encompass everything that we've heard thus far over the last 3 years. Small business assistance, land acquisition, housing, developer assistance, community identity. We do have climate change on here, but in your staff report, and also not to conflate or confuse with the work that is going on with the climate change or the climate action plan, we would propose changing that to environmental stewardship because it would encompass more than just CO2 emissions. It could encompass anything that about protecting the natural environment. blight remediation, and then obviously transportation.
We, Jonathan and I have talked about getting more input from you on your priorities and the order of those priorities. And we are planning to send out a survey to the mayor and city council to fill out that will allow you to rank those priorities and maybe give some input on those priorities in terms of the funding amounts that you think should be allocated to the different sets of priorities. And just as a percentage of an overall pie, so not yet talking about how much money we have, but we're talking about if we have 100% pie, how much of that do you think you want to use toward housing? How much of that do you want to use toward community identity? How much towards transportation in percentages, rough percentages? So we will be sending out by the end of the week information to you to try to get back that survey and then compile that information to bring back to you in a future meeting for discussion. We find that works a little easier than trying to go through that all together in one night, especially tonight when we've run out of time. So we hope that will work well for you. I've done that with a number of city councils and it seems to work very well. Next slide.
So part of council's 2030 vision is a connected, informed, and engaged community. And this is also in modeling what council directed staff to do for the prior development area in the southwest of Basalt Creek. So here we've kind of talked with staff and also a couple of community members to see, how would this proposed working group look as compared to what Basalt Creek turned out to be. And so the proposal is to have a membership of at least 10 participants. Because it is in the core area, we want to be all encompassing and also get a lot of perspectives within the working group. And, last time we just had a planning commissioner, a city council member, and a couple of property owners for the Basalt Creek area. And that was the reason it was limited, is because it was greenfield and we had a lot of work done and a lot of work currently going on with Basalt Creek concept plan, et cetera. So we're proposing just to be a little bit more broader and encompassing for feedback. So in your staff report, you'll see we propose at least one member from T-Park, one from the Tualatin Planning Commission, a city council member nominated by the mayor, one representative from the Tualatin Chamber of Commerce, one from the Commercial Citizen Involvement Organization, one from an interested overlapping taxing district, and at least 4 participants should be either property owners or operate a small business within the area. It is a kind of a larger group, but because this is a pretty paramount area, we think it would be best served if we had a lot of voices. Now, in addition to that, for staff feedback that we're doing for stakeholder feedback, we intend to take this out to the public as well as we move forward through the project when projects are identified, open houses. But this is more along the lines of having this working group to basically have feedback on what council's looking for. So it's a continuous loop of information from one point to another. That way, both the council and the working group have a solidified ownership over what this document could fund in the future.
This is the proposed timeline. So we're at the end of February. So January and February was preliminary boundary determination and financial impact analysis with consultants. So we have been looking at potential boundaries and what those boundaries might produce in terms of tax increment. We have talked preliminarily with staff about that, and we'll get some more staff feedback as we refine that and then bring that back to you for your information and input. And so from now through July, led by you, the City Council, staff will propose projects and a bucket list of concerns and opportunities for long-term prosperity. There will be multiple advisory groups consulted, and we will talk to you both about the financing, the potential projects, have you review those projects so that you're very active in and providing guidance for the development of the plan. We're hoping to do that now through July, and then from August through December to actually go through the process of potential plan adoption. And that is conferring with all of the regional partners, all of the taxing jurisdictions, and trying to get a plan in effect before the end of December. If you can do that, then your first funding comes a year earlier than if you wait till anytime after January 1st. So you can go longer than that, but that is why we have set that time frame, is because it gives you potential funding an entire year earlier than if we miss that end of December date. Next slide. So I know we don't have much time, and we'll just have to look to you to see how much you want to spend on these questions. But the feedback that your staff and I would like to know is, number one, is the proposed working vision a good foundation to move forward with? And so I'll just read all three, and then we'll come back and you can tell me how you want to give input. Are the plan, values, and priorities still consistent with the council's direction and community vision for the area? And does council agree with the proposed working group template? So, Mr. Mayor, do you want to give me some advice on how much time we have to go through those questions and how you'd like to proceed?
Sure. I think if we can allocate about 15 minutes to discussion, and then we can quickly go through the rest of our business after that.
Okay, that sounds great. So the very first question, and I kind of where I printed all of this out, is the proposed working vision a good foundation to move forward with? And I don't know, I think you all have the packets, and so you have that vision in front of you. I think the input would be great to be just general input. If you want to do wordsmithing or changing on that, that can be something that we can do moving forward. But if you think we've missed any key policy area or key idea in putting that together, it would be great to hear that feedback.
Any feedback for Elaine? In my mind, it's generally, I think it's pretty solid, but other feelings?
No, I agree with you, Mayor Bubenik. I thought it was a great start, and I thought it really incorporated a lot of the feedback that we had brought up in prior meetings, a lot of concerns.
Great. That's perfect. We had hoped that we had picked up, Jonathan did a good job putting that together, picking up the input from you, trying to make sure we're giving you back what it is that you want. The second question is, are the plan's values and priorities still consistent with the direction and community vision for the area? And those values and priorities did come out of those small group meetings with you all. You know, times change quickly. None of us knew we'd all be in a world war situation. I mean, so there may be things that have changed in your ideas there. So if so, we'd really like to hear any of that.
Councilor Pratt, and then Councilor Brooks.
I hope I'm not wordsmithing here, but number 2, leave no existing business behind. I just need that clarified, because all that comes to my mind is like, of course we want to support our businesses, but all that comes to my mind is like a Blockbuster. Like, we can't support that forever if we have a business that's just become outdated and hasn't moved ahead with the times.
Yeah, so great question. The reason that it's kind of framed that way is we don't want businesses, well, what we heard during the small group briefings, but also when we were kind of initially putting this together 3 years ago, the first concern of a couple of prior council members was, if we do this, we don't want to take the 47-year work that had been done by both businesses and the city to kind of be just washed away. So those that have been successful, we didn't want to displace them. So it's not about trying to save failing businesses, but those businesses that are successful, we want to maximize their effort while also bringing the area up as well. So just no projects that would potentially knock down a business that's been extremely successful.
Councilor Brooks.
I just want to thank you, Jonathan, for the environmental stewardship piece. I think it's a good change. And, you know, a lot of what I see in this vision is having a very clean, connected, and modern city core. So I'm very excited about this, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it so far, and my fellow counselors as well, because I know we spent quite a bit of time on it that one day. But I just want to really highlight that, because I think how we build things is really important, and how we think about things in a way that is, you know, just like what we talked about, reducing traffic and inviting green buildings and mixed use areas, and, you know, all the things. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness. Thanks.
Councilor Sacco.
Thank you. I see this piece a little bit in the vision, and so I don't know if it really needs to be in the values and priority, but are looking at this project through an equity lens. And as I see it in the vision, I'm pointing out living wage professionals, creative employment, cultural facilities. I just don't see that bulleted out anywhere, again, under the plan efforts, values, and priorities. I don't know that it needs to be, but I just kind of wanted to point that out, that is a huge focus for us. And as we're looking at this area, things like, you know, housing and enhanced connectivity, that we do look through it through the lens of an equitable lens for our entire community. And I kind of see with the environmental stewardship, you know, we always want to look for the, you know, those types of things. So maybe it goes without saying, but I just kind of see that as a missing piece here. And I don't know if others feel the same way. So I'd be interested to know what others think about that.
I would agree, because remember in our council advance, everything goes through the lens of DEI, you know, all our efforts now. Yep. We keep reminding ourselves. Right. Yeah, the thing here for Elaine, I'm not looking forward to this email on ranking these priorities. That might be a real tough challenge for me, because that's not something I look forward to. I mean, these are all, to me, very important, and I hate to put them in a list, but.
And that's exactly what you can do. We'll give you that option of saying, right. I mean, usually to make it easily, we usually say, what is your very top? You know, and usually people can say, well, one of these is very top, and it might be the environmental, you know, it might be the equity, it might be the environmental issue. And then we say, you know, something, but then we also say, you know, if you can't rank these, and they're all important, that's great information also. Okay. And then we know when we start allocating money to projects that it really has to be allocated, you know, throughout the spectrum. One of the things that the ranking does is helps the staff figure out how, I mean, they're putting together all these project lists, and then clearly there are more projects to be done than the amount of money you're going to be able to raise. So knowing what your priorities are helps them to know where to start cutting projects.
Good point. And what was the third question you needed answered?
The last question is, does the council agree with the proposed working group template?
Mm-hmm. Councilor Pratt and Councilor Brooks.
Well, first, the working group, March 28th. Okay. My only suggestion, and I don't think it's right to add this group as a required, but I would like to ask that of the 4 people, business owners, that you look to the people that participate in the core area parking group. There's only like 3 or 4 of them, but they are knowledgeable about this area and invested. So I think they might have a good perspective to add to this group. But I wouldn't want to require it just because there's so few people in the group.
Council Brooks?
I appreciate a larger committee. I think that's a really strong point. When I'm thinking through, I think also about, since we're talking about mixed use, like residents, even of the condos or residential owner, like there's such a difference between sort of landlords and people that live in those spaces too. So with that equity lens, but I think both of those parties are part of the conversation in my mind. And the other piece, just because we've talked about cultural pieces and a unique view, and I don't think it has to be mandatory either. But I do think of the arts committee people because they have just a different way of looking at things that sometimes is really creative, and could also be informative around just the important cultural spaces in our downtown area. But I'm just saying it. I'm not saying it has to be or anything.
I think that's great input from all.
Councilor Hillier?
Thank you. I just wonder, I just love all of this, and honestly, it just goes to enhancing the protective factors in our community for our youth and especially our underrepresented families. And I really appreciate that. And I wonder if in the proposed group, it wouldn't be, we have an awful lot of teens who are having to pick up working to support their families, and if it would make any sense to have a youth represented on that committee in some sort, or even someone 25 and older, or excuse me, 25 and younger specifically. We're all about that, right? But up to 25 and under, maybe be considered.
All right, that's a good suggestion. Yeah. With that, the only thing I would add, I'd like to get 1 or 2 CIO members, or maybe 1 or 2 of the CIO presidents on the committee, towards Councilor Brooks' idea of a resident, because we're hearing loud and clear from residents about business growth here in town. So, and I know the commercial CIO has one lens, but I'm sure some of the CIO presidents I hear from have a different lens. So if we could get 1 or 2 CIO presidents to volunteer, that'd be great in my mind. All right, so you have everything you need, Elaine? Oh, Councilor Pratt.
Councilor Pratt and Councilor Grimes.
Councilor Grimes. Yep.
All right, one last question. Who will select these committee members? I guess let's go through.
You will.
You will. Okay.
So just so you know what we're going to do. So starting tomorrow, we're going to start putting out a little bit of advertisements, sort of similar to what the DEI committee is doing for community input, but taking these suggestions in, we'll have to kind of maybe reach out through other channels to get some participants on. We want to leave it open. So we've got a month to select the committee based on the time frame. And so by March 28th, you'll have the resolution with particular individuals, but ahead of time, you'll get a list of slate of candidates that you might come across your desk, and I'll work through Sherilyn and Don to present that information.
Thanks for your work on this. This is kind of exciting.
Council President Grimes.
Thank you. I think this is super exciting. I'm so happy, and I would love to be on the committee. So if you have to nominate someone, Mayor.
All right.
I put myself forward.
All right.
Enthusiastically. I would love it.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, so you have what you need, Jonathan and Elaine?
Yes,
We
sir.
do, and thank you so much for your input. And we're both very excited to move forward on this with you. So you'll be
Thank
seeing a
you.
lot of us.
All right, that's a good thing. All right, so with that, that brings us to getting organized for our regular city council meeting following this. So the top two things I want to start off with are the two proclamations. One is the proclamation for Parkinson's awareness. Is everybody okay with that coming back to us for the to blah 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 to proclaim April Parkinson's Awareness Month? Well, they'll come back either next meeting or the following meeting. Everyone okay with that? See thumbs up. All right. The one that we have to go by council rules, the proclamation on Ukraine. In order to bring that back tonight, to have it read tonight, which I think is appropriate, we have to say it's an emergency, which kind of it is because the conflict is occurring right now. We don't want to wait 2 weeks for this. And it also has to be approved unanimously by the city council members in attendance so it can be read tonight. So is everyone okay with the proposed proclamation? All right. Who would like to read that proclamation? Okay, Councilor Brooks. I was going to look at Councilor Sacco because she did quite a bit of editing. You're okay? Have Councilor Brooks do it? All right, Councilor Brooks, you're it. Let's see what else we have. We have that's the proclamation. The pledge, I think, is led by Council President Grimes tonight. And then any questions on what's on the consent agenda tonight? Any concerns with them? All right. I think that's it. So we got about 15 minutes. Because we do have, remember, we have the executive session after the regular city council meeting. So I'll go ahead and start our roundtable now and get as many done as we can before 7 o'clock. So I'll go ahead and start with Councilor Pratt.
Okay, so I had 4 meetings and 3 of them were in one day on the 16th. It started with C4 Metro, and that was just the response from the Oregon Transportation Commission to C4, and that's moving on with the tolling stuff. So we'll see where that goes. At a core area parking meeting, and it was really exciting. We got to tour the city services building, and I found out, I'm going to give you a fact here, that Rachel Sykes, our new public works director, is a real person and not someone we just see on Zoom. So that was kind of exciting to see her in person. Then we met with Councilor Sacco, Councilor Brooks, and I met with Chair Harrington and Washington County Chair Harrington, Commissioner Roy Rogers, someone from Clean Water Services, Sherilyn was there. Anyway, we got to discuss our concerns about the Basalt Creek extension. I don't know what to say about that. I guess we got to voice our concerns. And I was a little disappointed that, especially with the sound mitigation, that they weren't really willing to discuss that further, but I'll leave it, the other two say what they'd like to about that. And then I have one more meeting here and I can't find it. This morning we had the Tualatin Climate Action Committee steering committee. So that's very exciting too, that we're going to have our greenhouse gas emissions inventory and our geospatial, I can't even say it, geospatial analysis update. That should be done by the end of April. That's it.
Thank you. Councilor Sacco.
Well, I attended the meeting with Chair Harrington, as Valerie mentioned, so nothing to add there. I also attended the I-205 tolling meeting, but you all basically saw the same presentation that I saw. And so that's about it.
Thank you. Councilor Hillier.
I did not attend any meetings, but am following some happenings with MAC. And if there's anything to report, Bates or I'll let you know.
Okay. Councilor Brooks.
There we go. Hi, everybody. the first meeting is the Tualatin Arts Advisory Committee meeting. And I just want to thank everybody that contributed to ranking the proposed art for the art wrap, the utility box wraps. So the utility box wraps, we have in the budget money for 2, and we already have 1 business owner as well that's going to be contributing for one of the wraps. And so that's really super exciting. And there's some other things that we're looking at that we might be adding to our focus, but that's not official yet. So stay tuned. But I have to say, with not only the sponsorship of the boxes, but also the selection of the art, that it's a lot of effort that not only the committee puts in, and they have such a great eye, but also the community contributing as well, the business community as well as the residents. So I just want to give a big shout out and thank you, and also to all the artists that submitted work, because there's a lot of great work, and we would like to put all of it up eventually. And then I too went to the Basalt Creek meeting and with Chair Harrington. So I appreciate that was a meeting that was, I guess, slated for August, and we finally got to it. So I'm grateful that we were all there for it. I share the concerns with the sound mitigation. One of the comments was that it was going to affect one house, which doesn't make any sense to me. And but I do really want to underscore the fact that Clean Water Services was there, and that taking a look at better management of the canyon itself is one thing that I'm very grateful that we are doing. And the other thing that came out of that meeting that I thought was really important to note is the commitment to good communication by the county to the city, which in my mind should just be happening as a course of action. And but that was very verbalized and appreciated. And I also want to say I was at the climate action the meeting today as well. And another piece that we talked about, which is important to note, is there is an equity framework that goes through the CDC breakdown, and it's a unique way of looking at things. So that was one really interesting thing that came out of the meeting. And the other thing is when the way that we figure out the measurements for the greenhouse gas and all of that, there's going to be templates that stay with the city that are going to allow the city staff to be able to update in the future. So I just want to say that because I'm really happy that it's going to be a good investment that's going to last longer than the term of the work that we're doing currently. That's it. Thanks.
Okay. Councilor Grimes.
I have no reports to share tonight. My meeting is actually next week, so I'll have something next meeting.
All right, terrific. I had a bunch of meetings as usual. A lot of them in those last half of the month have been economic development related. GPI meetings, Chamber of Commerce meetings. I was nominated and added to the board of the Greater Portland Economic Development District. And what that is that subsidiary of GPI, that is, the board is now in charge of implementing the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or CEDS. So this board is in charge of helping GPI with that CEDS process we just wrapped up on how, basically what's the region's goals in as far as economic development, and the region being inclusive of Vancouver. So I was very happy to be nominated and added. We're going to meet quarterly and proceed on and getting some federal grants and work with the area all the businesses, chambers of commerce and the like, to reach those goals and assist all the milestones we have set in terms of comprehensive economic development strategy here. WEA was an interesting early morning meeting, no breakfast, still Zoom. The Washington County Sheriff is out with doing the rounds, asking for support of the enhanced Sheriff's Patrol, additional funding. There'll be a bond measure going out. That doesn't impact us directly since we have the Tualatin Police, but the folks in unincorporated Washington County are being asked to increase the rate per thousand to maintain Sheriff Patrol. What was interesting is, and kind of scary, is the South Cooper Mountain Affordable Housing Project is in a cash crunch because with COVID and increase in building, they've watched the cost of their proposed affordable housing go up $15 million and they can't fill it. Yeah, so they're out looking for money to fill that gap. They're actually looking at selling off some of the land that they have purchased for this facility to help defray the costs. So we got to keep an eye on that with obviously with SEPA, with Planned Parenthood Gardens, hoping that they're not in the same financial situation of, with the increase in building costs and labor that, they're going to have to go out and get some more money. So Rachel Duke is on my to-call list next week after hearing about this. The MMC, Metro Mayors, I sent you the letter, was sent out to the legislature. There's only a few bills that are still alive that have been passed yet. And there's a few that we're very interested in. So we're hoping to get some traction in the waning days here with the last 2 weeks of the session. Mayor Wheeler attended the MMC meeting, asking for and very accepting of a regional approach to houselessness. The issue in Portland is making the news, starting to cause people to leave Portland, is starting businesses to leave the Portland metro area, and it's making it very difficult to attract businesses to the Portland metro area. So all the mayors in the region want to figure out, what can we do to make this right? It's just not a Portland plan. It's not a metro plan. It's a regional plan. And it's just not this region, it's the state. It was brought up that people are struggling with very high rates of houselessness and homelessness on the coast. Because you think our houses are very unaffordable, go to the coast where the folks are, waiting tables and stuff and they can't afford an apartment. So we'll be looking at that. And finally, I want to give kudos to Jonathan Taylor. He did an outstanding presentation at the Small Cities Consortium of GPI. It was a meeting basically letting the members of the Small Cities Consortium know the benefits of being a member of Greater Portland Link, access to the databases, access to incredible economic development information. So Jonathan was there telling his story and how some of the databases are invaluable to him, and some of the ideas he's gotten via GPI that helped out Tualatin. A lot of the other economic developer folks in other cities were asking him a lot of questions. So Jonathan did a terrific job of showing what he's done here in Tualatin, some of his ideas. We all know the BRC was his idea, and how he's transitioning from a recovery mode here in Tualatin to a retention and expansion mode of businesses here in Tualatin. So with that, we have about 5 minutes left to go run to the potty, and we'll come back at 7 o'clock and kick off our regular meeting. We'll see you in about 5.